October 14th, 1066. A single day that would forever change the course of English history. On a Sussex hillside, two armies clashed in a brutal, day-long struggle that would decide the fate of a nation. This is the story of the Battle of Hastings. The day England was conquered. Our story begins not on the battlefield, but with the death of a king. In January 1066, King Edward the Confessor died without a clear heir. This created a power vacuum, a throne up for grabs, and three powerful men believed it was their destiny to fill it. First, there was Harold Godwinson, the most powerful earl in England. He was English, respected, and on his deathbed, King Edward had supposedly named him as his successor. The English nobility agreed, and he was crowned King Harold II almost immediately. To the English, he was the rightful king, but to others across the water strongly disagreed. Across the North Sea was Harold Hardrada, the fearsome king of Norway. A legendary Viking warrior, Hardrada claimed his right to the throne through a complex and rather shaky deal made between his predecessor and a previous Danish king of England. To him, Harold Godwinson was a usurper, and he began assembling a massive fleet to take what he believed was his. And then, across the English Channel, there was William, the Duke of Normandy. William was a formidable and ambitious ruler. He claimed that years earlier, King Edward had promised him the throne. Even more, he alleged that Harold Godwinson himself had once shipwrecked in Normandy and sworn an oath, on holy relics no less, to support William's claim. When Harold took the crown, William saw it as a personal betrayal and a sacrilegious act. He immediately began preparing for an invasion, even securing the Pope's blessing, which allowed him to frame his conquest as a holy crusade. So, the stage was set. King Harold Godwinson of England knew he was in an impossible position, with two massive invasion forces preparing to strike from opposite directions. He had to make a choice. He gathered his army, the formidable English Fyrd, and marched them to the south coast, expecting William to be the first to arrive. He waited all summer, his men staring out at the empty channel. But the winds were against the Normans. William's fleet was stuck in port. Then, in early September, came the news Harold had been dreading. Harold Hardrada, the Viking king, had landed in the north of England. He had sailed up the River Humber with an army of thousands and had already defeated a local English force. Harold had no choice. In a remarkable feat of speed and logistics, he force-marched his army over 200 miles north in just a matter of days. On September 25th, Harold launched a surprise attack on the unsuspecting Viking army at Stamford Bridge, near York. The battle was a stunning, decisive victory for the English. Harold Hardrada was killed, his army was annihilated, and the Viking threat to England was ended forever. It was a glorious moment for King Harold, but he had no time to celebrate. Just 3 days later, as Harold's exhausted but triumphant army was recovering in the north, he received the worst possible news. The winds in the Channel had finally changed. William of Normandy had landed his army at Pevensey, on the south coast. The Norman invasion had begun. Harold was now faced with an unbelievable challenge. His army was battered and exhausted from the forced march north and the brutal battle at Stamford Bridge, but he couldn't wait. He had to confront William. So, he turned his army around and began another grueling forced march, 250 miles back down to the south of England. Many of his best soldiers, the professional warriors known as housecarls, had been wounded or killed at Stamford Bridge. He gathered what men he could along the way, but his army was a shadow of its former strength. He arrived near Hastings on the evening of October 13th. His plan was simple and effective. He would take up a defensive position on high ground and let William's army exhaust itself attacking uphill. It chose Senlac Hill, a ridge that gave him a commanding view of the surrounding area. His men formed a tightly packed shield wall, a near-impenetrable barrier of shields and spears. It was a classic and proven Anglo-Saxon tactic. As dawn broke on October 14th, the English stood waiting, a silent, grim line on the hilltop. Below them, William's Norman army prepared for battle. It was a different kind of force. Unlike the primarily infantry-based English army, William's force was a mix of archers, foot soldiers, and his greatest asset, a large contingent of heavily armored knights on horseback. This was the cutting edge of medieval military technology. The battle began around 9 a.m. with a volley from the Norman archers. They fired their arrows up the slope, but they had little effect. either flying over the heads of the English or harmlessly thudding into the wall of shields. Then William sent his infantry, charging up the hill. They crashed against the shield wall with a terrifying roar of metal on wood and metal on metal. The English held firm. Their long axes, capable of cleaving a man and his horse in two, swung with deadly effect. The Normans were repulsed, time and time again, leaving the slope of the hill littered with their dead and wounded. Next, William sent in his elite weapon. The knights. They thundered up the hill, lances lowered, expecting to smash through the English line. But the shield wall held. The hill was too steep, the English formation too dense. The knights were forced back in disarray. At one point, a rumor spread through the Norman ranks that Duke William himself had been killed. Panic began to set in. Seeing his army on the verge of collapse, William rode through his lines, lifting his helmet to show his face. "Look at me!" he yelled. "I live, and by God's grace, I shall conquer." His presence rallied his men. Then, William noticed something interesting. During the chaotic retreat of his knights, some of the inexperienced English soldiers on the right flank had broken formation, chasing the Normans down the hill in a rush of overconfidence. They were quickly cut down and annihilated by the regrouping Norman cavalry. This gave William a brilliant, if risky, idea. He ordered his knights to charge the shield wall again, but this time to pretend to retreat. It was a feigned retreat, a difficult and dangerous tactic. The Normans did it once, and then twice. Each time, more of the disciplined English line broke ranks to give chase, believing the Normans were finally beaten, and each time the Norman knights would turn on their pursuers, trapping them on the open ground and destroying them, slowly, painstakingly. The tactic worked. The English shield wall, which had been so strong, began to shrink. It was getting thinner and weaker with every feigned retreat. The battle had raged all day, a grueling contest of endurance. As dusk began to fall, the English were still holding the hilltop, but they were exhausted, and their numbers were severely depleted. King Harold himself was still there, fighting among his loyal house. William knew he needed one final, decisive push. He ordered his archers to change their tactics. Instead of firing directly at the shield wall, he told them to arc their shots high into the air, so the arrows would rain down on the men standing in the rear of the English formation. It was a devastating move. What happened next is the most famous moment of the battle, immortalized on the Biar tapestry. As arrows fell from the sky, one, so the story goes, struck King Harold in the eye. He fell, mortally wounded. Seeing their king fall, the last remnants of English resistance crumbled. The Norman knights surged forward, smashing through the now litterless shield wall. They found Harold and hacked his body to pieces. The death of the king was the end. The remaining English soldiers fled into the woods as darkness fell. The battle was over. William, from that day known as the Conqueror, had won. In a single, bloody day, the fate of England had been sealed. William marched to London, and on Christmas Day 1066, he was crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey, the very same place Harold had been crowned less than a year before. The Norman conquest was complete. This one battle brought about a total transformation of English society. The old English aristocracy was replaced by a new French-speaking elite. The English language itself was forever changed, absorbing thousands of French words. The legal system, the architecture, the very culture of the nation was The Battle of Hastings wasn't just a change of king. It was the end of one world and the beginning of another. It's a dramatic tale of ambition, fate, and brutal warfare, where the history of a nation was written in blood on a single autumn day. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey back in time interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most pivotal moments. Let me know in the comments what other battles you'd like to see covered. See you next time.